It's showtime!
Version 3.6 is on the horizon, and Kaveh and Baiju are coming along with it, which signifies the return of Geo being put back into last place in terms of playable characters representing the element. Now, it's not going to be in dead last, it's going to be tied with Dendro for a little bit, and at this rate, I would assume about no longer than a single patch. It would be shocking if it took longer. I mean, come on, look how fast we've been getting new Dendro characters. For Dendro to have so many playable characters in only a little over half of a year is quite impressive. If you're like me, you actually welcome the endless onslaught of new plant people to play with, just hoping that each new one will be what takes Aggravate Sino from feeling kind of mediocre to play to feeling actually pretty strong. However, for as sad as Geo is doing, it has nothing on physical. Granted, that's a lot harder to quantify in terms of representation, given that physical characters still have an element. We have 3 characters that are truly dedicated and focused on physical damage, and what I mean by that is they are encouraged by their kit in multiple different ways to actually pursue physical damage as their main on-field source of damage, and that being Razor, Eula, and Xinyan. I can already imagine I gave some of you whiplash by even mentioning Xinyan's name in this, and yes, absolutely Xinyan is a physical DPS. That doesn't mean that she has to be great at it, or even as good as the other 2 I mentioned, but her kit in multiple ways encourages her to be a physical DPS. She has a burst that does physical damage. Her C2 causes it to automatically crit every single time, and her C1 and her C6 both encourage her to do physical charged attacks. Not necessarily physical, but since she has no innate way to infuse herself, it is assumed to be physical. Not to mention she can both increase physical damage percent for herself and her team, and also reduce the enemy's physical resistance. If you ask me, this absolutely qualifies her to be considered a physical DPS. Once again, this does not mean she has to be great at it. Her kit is encouraging her to do it. She just doesn't do it as well as Eula and Razor, that's all. I mean, maybe Razor debatable, but I think Razor's better. Now, I know that there's going to be those who say, actually, Rosaria is a great physical DPS, and so is Chi-Chi, and Kaching, and anyone else you can think of. There are characters that can do physical DPS. Every character who doesn't have a catalyst can do physical DPS, and some characters even have maybe 1 or 2 things in their kit that might somewhat benefit it, like Fischl. When you compare units like those to Eula and Razor, they just don't have anywhere near the support they have within their kits to actually do physical DPS. Once again, if you don't have a catalyst, you can pretty much do physical DPS. What I'm concerned with is the characters that are meant to do physical in pretty much every way of their kit. If you try to play Eula as a cryo DPS, it's just not going to go over well. As always, if you're playing a physical DPS Layla or physical DPS Candace, it doesn't matter to me. You keep doing you, having fun the way you want to have fun. If somebody out there is getting upset over the way you are playing the game and you are ruining their time, that's their problem, not yours. Until Mika's release today, it was actually really hard not to just think that physical as a primary concept for a character was just completely abandoned and forgotten by the development team. Like, sure, we have gotten some characters that do interact with physical in some ways. You know, Shenhe reduces physical resistance by a little bit. Rosaria also reduces physical resistance by a little bit. So sure, little bits of physical support are littered throughout the game. It's just they're nothing compared to Mika. Mika is a dedicated physical support. It's without a doubt, like, that is his purpose.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't. But I've considered it.
With that, we can decisively say that physical hasn't been completely forgotten, but it's certainly not a priority, and it's not exactly surprising. Given that one of Genshin Impact's selling points in advertising was a robust elemental combat system centered around mixing characters and elements together to cause various reactions, it's just not surprising at all that the non-element of physical just isn't that popular, especially as time goes on. A newbie player to the game might absolutely find comfort in physical as an element. They're just starting out, they learn that there's 7 elements and reactions for all of them, and they might get overwhelmed at the amount of combinations they have, leading them to just decide that, hey, I just might pick up Fizz. It's a lot more comforting to just smash Hilly Churl with big metal stick for big white number instead of learning all of the reactions right away. As you play the game more, you'll encounter various types of enemies, certain ones that have elemental weaknesses, certain ones that have elemental shields, especially if you venture into Enkanomiya and find Abyss Heralds and Lectors out in the open. And in that point, you might say, hey, Fizz kinda has a weakness, and elements kinda shred these shields pretty quick. Hell, you might even find fun encountering these mechanics. You'll encounter world bosses that also require specific elements to either outright finish the fight in the case of the Dendro hypostasis, or just specific elements to make the fight easier. Geo, on the other hand, while being an element, it is still very similar to Physical in that it kind of just is decently effective against everything. Things that are immune to Geo are few and far between, basically just Geo Slimes and Geo Specters, neither of which are particularly common enemies, which to many players can probably lead to Fizz and Geo feeling relatively similar in the way you play them, just kind of unga-bungaing through the game and just kind of ignoring all the mechanics around you. Fizz doesn't exactly have a lot to worry about, you know, nothing is immune to them, they don't really do much against shields, but you could break it extremely slowly, and Geo is not too different. Having only crystallized to worry about as a reaction, it's basically Physical that leaves little Skittles on the floor, except a Skittle might offer more defense than what these sad sack of shit little shields have to offer. Both just end up being generalist elements or non-elements, whatever the hell you want to call Physical, and you can kind of just take them against everything and you will kill it, just perhaps very slowly in some cases, like Lectors and Heralds. This is to say that neither of these elements are heavily rewarded in the later stages of the game, and they have a much lower ceiling than reaction-based teams, leading many players to either never building these elements to begin with, or dropping them for more appealing teams later on. I'm of the opinion that I think there is value in having these elements in the game as the way they are. Sure, I would love Crystallized to be reworked and Physical to maybe have some more enemies that they're actually truly great against. Ultimately, what they need is just more support in terms of roster, but that is the main problem. Like, yes, sure, we just got Mika, and Mika is a fantastic physical support. He is doing so many things I've wanted for a long time, and he is a very powerful character. The problem is, he just doesn't have that many characters he's truly meant to support. Now, anybody who's playing a physical character can utilize this character and use him well, but what I hope is that Mika is the sign of more physical characters to come. Maybe some with more interesting kits, because Eula, she was released a long time ago, and in terms of Geo, the last time we got a Geo character was 2.7 with Ito. And the real sad part, and the reason that we probably don't get any new characters in these, is that these characters do not sell well. If we take a look at the handy dandy revenue chart, we can see that a lot of Geo banners are not doing so well. And the best one is Zhongli, which I think I would argue, and this isn't exactly a weak argument, that he succeeds despite being Geo, not because he's Geo. We just want his big ass shield. In a world where Zhongli was a different element, I don't think it would hurt his sales that badly. His shield would still be pretty strong, even though it does lose the bonus for being a Geo shield just because of its raw HP scaling, and ultimately that's why most people want Zhongli. They just want his shield, or they want him because he's an Archon, or they want him because they're a degenerate. Regardless of any of those reasons, Zhongli is the best-selling Geo character we have. Not only that, but according to my community poll results, Ito, Zhongli, and Albedo are all top 20 favorite characters, having a lot of people loving these characters. However, that doesn't exactly reflect in their sales. And why is that? Well, that's because I think a lot of people just find Geo pretty damn boring. It doesn't react with anything other than Crystallized, but I've been over that, and it doesn't really open up any new team comps. If a new Geo character comes out, my first thought is, how does this interact with my Ito team? What can it do for Ito? And you know, that's despite the fact that we have characters like Yunjin that interact with a lot of different characters. And Albedo can be inserted in a lot of different teams because he's just kind of an inoffensive, good source of damage. The thing is, though, is if these characters aren't going to sell very well, why would Hoyoverse put the time into making them? Invest resources, try to hype them up when ultimately, no matter what they do, they don't seem to sell extraordinarily well. You can make this extremely magnetic, lovable, boisterous character like Arataki Ito, and even then, the sales aren't that good. Then we can switch it over to Eula and look at her, and in Eula's case we have literally the world's highest revenue generating sneeze in recorded human history, and my source is just trust me on that, because when the hell else has anyone ever shelled out a shitload of money for a sneeze, for a character sneezing? Look, I know that many people were probably joking about that. They probably weren't serious, but I know at least one person was serious and probably spent money because they thought that was cute. And even with the little sneeze bump, Eula didn't exactly sell that well. She did okay, but not exactly enough to say that Physical is a very good selling point. Eula's release even happened pretty early on in the game when Physical was viewed a lot more favorably than it is today. And now that we have a character like Mika, who is a very potent physical steroid, I'm actually curious just how strong physical characters being released are going to be, if we get any more. As I said previously, the financial incentive just doesn't seem to be there, with Physical and Geo characters not selling gelling particularly well in either case. Why put the effort into designing and marketing a character of these elements when a character of a different element will probably sell a lot better and even have a chance of having a resurgence in the future when new characters come out that will likely work with them, where Geo and Physical just don't interact with a majority of the playable cast. It's a real shame because I am genuinely a fan of both of these elements. I love Physical, I mained it in the beginning with both Razor and Physical Kaching, and at the same time I also mained Noelle. She was the second half of my Abyss team to my Physical Kaching. Later on, of course, I moved on to using Ito, and for a while in between I didn't even use Noelle. I started using more reaction-based teams because they were just more fun. What I would like to know from you is, do you like Physical and Geo? Do you roll for the characters or do you skip them because of their non-reactive nature? Or do you find them boring, or are you just looking for more characters that can interact with your currently built teams? Mika makes me a little bit hopeful, but I understand if maybe you're a little bit more pessimistic about this and you just think that Eula's getting a really late little bit of life support. In any case, thank you to you for watching, thank you to my YouTube members and my patrons for supporting me as always, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and this C6 Mika took me over 30,000 primos to get. F you, Diona. You. Every time this stupid little cat girl's on a banner, it's nothing but a curse upon my life. She is the worst, and she deserves every single vote that went to Dory incorrectly.